off by telling us a little bit about She-Wolf as a show, because this is a show with a big difference.
Yeah, so She-Wolf, it's very different from all my other shows. It's my only character piece. So I play Queen Margaret of Anjou, who was a real person, but ended up as a character in 4 of Shakespeare's history plays. So I play her back from the dead, very cranky about the way she's been represented, and wanting to set the record straight. So I kind of use her as a lightning rod to examine the way our society has treated women in positions of power in the past and how we treat them now, and asking the question if anything's changed. It's a comedy.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about what kind of research did you have to do into Queen Margaret, because of course for many of us we would have read about her in Shakespeare's plays, but as you said, she was a real person. So tell us a little bit about what kind of research you had to do to put this show together.
Yeah, I spent a lot of hours in the State Library in Victoria reading biographies on her, going over just a lot of history books to make sure that I had that history 100% correct. Because I studied Shakespeare for my master's degree. So I had an understanding of how she was portrayed in those plays from my master's, but then I wanted to make sure that I had the history 100% correct too. So, it was very important for me in this show that the history was correct, the Shakespeare was on point, so that anything that I interpreted was mostly, just the character or how she might be portrayed or the personality, things that you can't necessarily know for sure. But it was a lot of reading.
Yeah, so in your press release you describe Margaret as the original Cersei Lannister and a model for Claire Underwood. Tell us a little bit about what Margaret was like in real life and what kind of differences are there between real life and how Shakespeare portrayed her.
Well, Cersei Lannister in Game of Thrones is actually based on the Shakespearean version of Queen Margaret of Anjou. So that's just a fun little fact. But she was a woman put in some really challenging positions, and she didn't really have a lot of say or agency. And the power she was able to wrangle, it was remarkable that she did do that. In Shakespeare, she's portrayed as just a straight-up evil woman with, no morals, no ethics, just clamoring after power, happy to murder children, happy to kill everybody to get ahead. When in reality, yes, she made some terrible choices, and I wouldn't necessarily say she was the nicest woman, but she wasn't doing anything the men weren't doing. She wasn't a demon. She wasn't evil. She was trying to secure what she felt she had a right to, and historically speaking, that was her right. It was just atypical that she was a woman and wasn't giving up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's where I don't try to paint her as some innocent woman. She's by no means innocent, but she was not evil. That, in my understanding of it, she wasn't doing this just to go murder children or, just to retain power. She was under the understanding that she was Queen of England. She had a son. Her son, was his right to be king, and was taken away from him, and her husband was incapacitated for most of the reign, and she didn't see why she couldn't rule in his stead. Why couldn't she, as Queen of England, rule as regent? Why did it have to be a man? So, yeah, I find it very interesting how she was portrayed.
Yeah, and what is she like as a character to play? It sounds like the kind of character that any actress would love to play. What's she like to play on stage?
Oh, she's super fun. When I play her, just talking about her life, she's very modern. Talking about a lot of modern references to make it relatable, but then the Shakespearean monologues I do as her, they're so fun. One of the reasons I became really interested in Queen Margaret is because she has some of the best monologues in all of Shakespeare. It's just a shame she's buried in these histories and these monologues that are spectacular. Monologues of that quality aren't necessarily super available to women. And you just have these amazing female characters just kind of buried in the histories, not getting performed very often. So she's so much fun to play because Shakespeare did create this character of Margaret where she's just pure villainy. And so some of the things she gets to say, some of the tirades she goes on are spectacular. And they're so much fun to do.
You mentioned before that you did Shakespeare for your masters. When was it that you became interested in comedy? Was that something that you had always wanted to do, or did that come a little bit later on?
I always loved comedy, but I wanted to be a very serious actress, which was my original plan. But I remember when we went on tour after we graduated, so I did my MFA at Lambda in 2008, and we did some shows in New York and LA for like industry stuff, and someone came up to me in LA and they were like, I think you'd be better at comedy. I took great offense at that, but I thought about it. And then when I moved to Toronto, I realized very quickly that you could be on stage more if you did comedy because you were in control. You could do stand-up, improv, sketch, and you were in control of when you got to be on stage, not a casting director, not someone else deciding whether or not you were good enough for their play. You could just be in control of your own career. And I started doing comedy with a sketch troupe, but they only did voice comedy. So I thought originally I was auditioning for a radio play, and then it turns out it was just a vocal-based sketch troupe. And that's how I started doing comedy, and everything kind of took off from there.
Wow, that sounds absolutely amazing. What was it like the first time when you walked out on stage to do comedy on your own? Because for me, that was last year, just before the lockdown. I did my first ever stand-up gig, and I was absolutely terrified when I first walked out there. What was that like for you the first time you did comedy on your own?
It was about 10 years ago. The photo just came up in my Facebook memories. I remember being in the green room, looking around at other people who were on this stand-up lineup with me. And I'd been doing, I'd been acting for quite a long time in theater, film, and television. And I'd been doing sketch and some storytelling shows because there's a huge storytelling scene in Toronto. And then I got booked on this stand-up gig, and I was like, oh, okay. And I knew my set. I had it down. I knew what I was going to do, and I was sitting in this green room, and I saw all the other comics like going over their set list and being a bit frantic. And I remember thinking, "Am I supposed to be more nervous?" It was exhilarating. It was a lot of fun, and I was like, "Oh, this is a good time." And I also remember that I took it very seriously. I wore both a vest and a blazer, so professional.
Yeah, and you've taken She-Wolf right around the world to various festivals. Tell us a little bit about how the different audiences in different countries have received the show.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I think it's fairly well received everywhere. The only place I was actually really nervous when I was doing it, I got booked to do She-Wolf and one of my other Shakespeare shows, 10 Things I Hate About Taming of the Shrew. I got booked to do those at the York International Shakespeare Festival in England. And I was like, oh, these people are going to hate me. Because if you're really into Shakespeare and if you're not willing to admit that he was a person and not a god, it can be a bit confronting. But they were actually really good. There were a few people who weren't cranky. I do get some people who will like say to me, "Oh, you have no right. You have no right to question him." And I'm like, "Yeah, I do. I have all the right in the world. Even if I didn't have the degree, which I do, it's still my right to question things." And then there are people who are like, "How dare you disrespect the bard?" And it's like, yeah, he was a dude. He was good with words, but let's calm down, shall we? He was just a person. No one is beyond question.
Exactly, and of course, people are going to absolutely love this show at the Melbourne International Comedy Festival. And for our listeners out there, you can check out She-Wolf from March 23rd to April 4th, not on Mondays, but all of the times and how you can go about getting tickets will be up on our website where you found this podcast, so make sure you check it out. Gillian, I guess to finish up, what would you like to say to our listeners out there before they go and grab tickets for this amazing show?
It's a really fun time. You don't have to know anything about Shakespeare. You don't have to know anything about history. I've done all the research for us, so don't worry about it. I got you covered. And it's not just for like history, Shakespeare, literary buffs too. It's just a really fun time for everyone. So yeah, if you want to see something a little bit different, something that really straddles somewhere between stand-up comedy and performance theater, and just I like to think of it as a profanity-laden TED Talk with monologue interjections. So if you want to see something that be like, okay, that's different, yep, come along to see She-Wolf.
Awesome. Well, we cannot wait to check out this show. So thank you so much for chatting to us today. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to head along.
Oh, that'd be so wonderful. I can't wait to see them.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, and hopefully we get to see you during the comedy festival.
Yeah, we'll see you around.